I would like to request Mr. V. Kumaraswamy to kindly come over the podium to enlighten us. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
Good evening. Respected Chief Guest, Mr. Manoj Fadnis, respected Mr. Mehta. My profession has taken me to several places in India, very remote rural places. And I have seen even people who are still using flint stones in India to light their cigars or maybe even their cigarettes. And to several other very poor regions, especially in Southeast Asia and Africa. One thing struck me when I visited Myanmar and Vietnam of late 2007-8, say. Myanmar has an income of 460 as against 1260 for India. Yet there's no begging anywhere in any of the cities there. Be it Yangon, be it Mandalay, be it Naypyidaw, their capital. People are orderly, and the discipline that you see on the road is as good as what you see in the Western countries. There are girls everywhere in the shops, in the tea stalls, etc., serving. The whiteness of their shirts can challenge any white shirts here. I am yet to see a case of open defecation there. It sets a train of thought in you. Is there something that we are doing wrong? We are supposed to be having at least 3 times our income. So much of begging right in the capital, right 5 kilometers from the, or maybe even less, from the president's palace. Is there something that we are doing wrong in getting our reform programs, because of which, what all we do, we are not increasing our growth rates beyond 7-8%, which in my opinion is a shame. 7 to 8% for this kind of a country which has so much of history, so much of knowledge, so much of willpower. So what I'll do is I'll just take 2 or 3 illustrative programs, see if, how we are getting things wrong, and after that move on to how to build. Let's see that I will just concentrate on only 1 or 2 points. There's no point in describing the whole NREGA for you. NREGA is given, other than, of course, in Tamil Nadu, where people allow to work for 7-8 hours to earn your minimum wages of 160. Most states, 150, 160 is the minimum wage. And you put in something like 2 to 3 hours of work for that, apart from, of course, some amount of greasing the palm, etc. That leads to an effective wage of something like 50 to 75 rupees per an hour. Whereas you come to the factory or even informal jobs in the cities and towns, for the same 150 rupees, you have to work for 8 hours, or perhaps in the informal sector, even more than 8 hours. That comes to an effective wage of 20 per hour. If a guy has to work 1 day in NREGA at 75 rupees effective wage, the next day he has to come to the factory to work at 20 rupees per hour effective wage, how long do you think he will have the motivation to come to the factory? It is like having Mr. Mehta, a strict disciplinarian who examines your paper. If you deserve 35, I'll give you only 35. If you deserve only 49, I'll give you only 49, although I know 50 is the pass mark. Another good Samaritan, very free person, whether you attend the class, whether you attempt all the answers, whether you write wrongly, rightly, including a person like me who has read only one chapter, I will give you 85 minimum, 100 minimum. Who do you think the students will prefer as a teacher? Do you think they're going to enroll with Mr. Mehta? It's ridiculous. What NREGA has done is destroyed the delicate balance of things which was there in the Indian labor market. I am not saying what all happens in the labor market is correct, but this is not the way to correct it. It has unfortunately raised the real rural wages and made difficult for industries to create more jobs. And that is why jobs in the last 20 years, particularly in the last 6-7 years, has never been commensurate with the kind of growth rates that we have seen. 7 to 8% should have resulted at least 1 or 2% growth rates. And many years in between it is negative. Let's come to land acquisition. A person who has a land, he's sitting on the land which can never be removed by an earthquake or tempest or storm or anything. Because of increasing land pressure, population pressure, it value keeps on increasing much more than the inflation rates. Plus, he gets an annual income out of that crop or whatever. And you want to take it away from him when for the last 100 generations his family has been doing only agriculture or whatever it is. You want to pluck it out of him and replace it with a financial asset, which he will deposit in the bank or mutual fund and earn income. When the base asset anybody can take away, it is not inflation proof. Believe you and me, there are several people in India, rural sector, including maybe in some urban sector, who have not seen a 100-rupee note in their lifetime. I am not lying. You go to any rural India, especially the tribal area, including the place where our factories are, you will come across such people. And to this gentleman, you are giving a financial asset, asking him to manage his finances with this financial asset. Just guess how many people invest in equities in India, in urban areas. Just 2% of the people invest in equities in India. Just 2%. If an educated mass living in the urban areas, just 2% of them invest in equity, you are expecting an unpaid, illiterate agricultural laborer who owns a small land to take a financial asset and give you back the land for your development when he has not seen any visible delivery from the government for the last 60 years. Aren't we being too very hopeful? Let's see the myth of infrastructure. Infrastructure is deficit. Ports are not there, airports are not there, roads are not there. Yes, it's not there, I also agree. I'm not claiming that it is all there. To develop this, I want 40 years concession, 30% of, or rather 30 years and 40% concession. If you take an Excel sheet and backwork what is the effective IRR on this kind of a project, it comes to 5 or 6%. Here, there is so much of screaming around for 5 or 6% investments when most of rural India is borrowing at 60–80% minimum. Quite often it exceeds 100–120% on a simple interest basis. And if you use the Black-Scholes model of continuous compounding, it's actually 1,000,000% in interest rate. Whereas we are screaming for 5 and 7% in infrastructure growth. I'm not saying infrastructure growth will have to come to a standstill. There are projects which gives you 14% return, 15% return, 22% return. You concentrate on them. If you want 4%, 5% return, yes, go and borrow in Japan as much as you want to throw open all FDI. They have funds at 0.5%, 1%. You borrow from there, get them as partners and invest in India as much as you want. Why do you have to compromise the rural India's ability to live an orderly life at a much cheaper interest rate, to build infrastructure at 4 and 5%? I think that's a ridiculous approach in my opinion, but I'll come to it a little later. Lastly, the financial integration. Such a beautiful, important topic of financial inclusion. Yes, everybody has been talking about it. Financial inclusion, financial inclusion. Have we cared even to define this term properly in the last 60 years? Can anybody give me a definition from any authentic source like RBI or anybody else for that matter, Finance Commission or government? There is no definition of financial inclusion here. Why? Because they are not clear on what it is. I will say, let's call it financial integration. In economics, there is one rule of intervention. You can either determine the price or the volume. You cannot determine both at the same time. For the last 50, 60 years from socialist years, this is what we have been doing. You have to lend 40,000 crores at 2% interest rate, 7% interest rate, whatever it is. Basic thing in economics doesn't work that way. You can either fix the price or the quantity. On top of it, all good Samaritan barriers. You cannot lend without good security. Which Arthashastra or Kama Sutra is it written, only a physical asset of a building or, plant and machinery can be a security? You must have heard of people getting kidnapped for ransom. You look at that fellow's psychology. He has no physical asset, etc., to demand ransom. He is not, barged into your house like a hijacker or something. He demands and gets often what he wants. Why? Nobody has put any value of this child is 1 crore or 2 crore or something. But he knows that if his dad and mom values him enough, they will cough up the entire wealth and more perhaps to get the child. He is able to rely on what is called the social relationship as a good enough security. But we won't accept it while trying to help the rural poor and urban poor. Why can't we make use of this good social asset for designing a system which will deliver money to him? We permanently keep abusing this moneylender. Without moneylender, I tell you, the farmer suicides will go up 100 times. He is delivering value. He knows when to lend to him, when to recover, how to recover, what kind of security to take from him. Why don't you use him as a last mile connectivity and flood him with money? Today he may be lending at 80-90%. When you flood him with money and he lends, interest rates will automatically come down if the supply increases so much. Instead of that, we are putting more and more restriction, SHGs can't do this, SHGs can't do this, we can't do this. I tell you, the reforms will not cross the double digit. Take my word for it, unless the financial markets are integrated. I am not saying that this rural India has a 98% recovery rate, much better than the corporate world as of now. If it is integrated, the money which is chasing something like 8%, 9%, 10% corporate, this one will flow there also. And instead of borrowing at 80%, 100%, he will borrow at 30%, 25%. This is one big factor that we have to attack if we want to make India grow. Beyond growth, pull up all those people who are below poverty line above it. To make 12% growth, we need, sir, you can tell me whenever I have to stop. So, the moment you see a couple of empty hands, all our benevolence and everything, rushes forth. You want to feed him with this one, jobs with Narega, and then Food Security Act, this one, that one, etc. If you, instead of seeing his empty belly, see his empty hands, give him some job, whatever it is. Maybe an artist, maybe a masseur, maybe a courier boy, maybe fetching provisions for your housewife from this one, or cleaning your car. Make use of empty hands to deliver or create some value. If he does it regularly, he will develop some skills automatically, or you give him skills. Such an approach will be expansionary in nature, in the sense that once there is a demand, there is a supply, he will create supply, and that supply will require investments. Investments will lead to employment. Instead of that, if you give him, wants to clean your car in the junction or something, you give him some money, he's not going to create supply chain for this. He's not going to create investments around it. We have to give up this habit of this as well as this if we want to progress as a nation. Next, you look at the rural person. Day in and day out, he is having risks, and risks. He might be bitten up by a snake. He might die in agricultural failure, suicide. He might be murdered by somebody for a petty matter. He might be run over by some vehicle. He might be dying of some other disease, H1N1, whatever. Or he may be murdered by the moneylender who has lent him money. So many risks he faces day in and day out. Just pause for a moment. Isn't it exactly what entrepreneurship is all about? Facing risks and surviving gloriously. Can we not create 1 billion entrepreneurs out of some people who have learned to live with risks? All that he needs is money at affordable rates. Affordable rates, I'm not saying at 7%, 8%, affordable rates at 30%. Even if you do a gradation and look at his payment record, He might be maybe C or triple B minus or D or whatever, D minus, whatever you create. Transaction values also are small, so he has to pay more. So you charge him 30%, 25%, whatever. The day you do it, he has all the makings of risk-taking entrepreneurship to go into entrepreneur and create micro-entrepreneurism. That's the way to go. Not that massive industries will create jobs. Massive industries have not created jobs. They create value. They create investments and subsidiary course. But it has some limitation because it takes a longer time to create the number of jobs that you want. Meanwhile, what will these people do? You have to create short-term, medium-term jobs for these people till the industries at the gross level absorbs these skills. Next thing is change our attitude. You must have been the victim as well as the protagonist of these crisscross driving, crowding at the mouth when queues are announced, trying to queue jump, spitting on everywhere, defecation, throwing litter all over. You won't believe India is the worst country I've seen anywhere in the world for these things. We have to get out of it. Just imagine if all of us decided to drive straight in one lane, there will be a 12% reduction in pollution in Delhi. Is it not worth attempting? There are 2.4 lakh lives which are lost in India every year due to accidents because of all this. Even if you put a value of 10 lakhs to it, it's about 24,000 crores. Add the value of the vehicles lost, another 24,000 crores, it's 48,000 crores. If only we change our attitudes, this 48,000 crores will be GDP, not a loss. New engines of growth we have to create. IT served us in 90s very well, but it's tapering off. Telecom served us between 2003 to 10, but that's also tapering off. You can't keep expecting people to buy more and more phones. We need new growth engines. I have 3 suggestions. One is tourism. Tourism, the capital intensity for growth is very, very small. Very few. We are not going to create another Taj Mahal or Red Fort for promoting tourism. Cambodia, which has just come out, maybe 75 to 79, they had one huge genocide. Their income is 460, ours is 1560. They get more tourists, 31 times in relative terms compared to India. Do a great lot in tourism. Government and social services. For an expanding economy, there are more transactions, more friction, people migrating. They create problems elsewhere. You need to have more and more governance. Instead of that, we are shrinking. A person who is consuming 17% by way of taxes, another 3 and 4% by way of other GDP, is shrinking jobs, government. And you are expecting other people will make up for him. Railways, you won't believe, they started with 17 lakh jobs in 1991. For the real income growth, there should have been 27, 28 lakh jobs. Today, they are at 13. You know what jobs they have destroyed at the lowest end? 69% of jobs they have destroyed at the lowest end, C and D class mazdoors and watchmen and railway policemen, etc. Policemen, so much of noise over Nirbhaya. 1,300 per million is the sanction strength of policemen vis-a-vis a world average of 3,000. 22 lakhs is the sanction strength of policemen, 17 lakhs is the actual strength, 5 lakhs is vacant. If this is the kind of approach to employment that we are going to have, no wonder employment is not getting created. Gold. India is home to something like 25,000 tons of gold, which is about $1 trillion. We are begging for 35 billion and 25 billion here and there. Just tap into this one resource, and you will have all the money required. Just distribute the interest alone. I'm not even talking about the capital at 8% to all the poor. There's about 36 crores of poor, below poverty line people, and you would have solved all your problem for everybody. Just invest only the interest at our high ICAR of 1%, or rather 4, you will get 1% growth every year, year on year. Forex, we have something like 330, 340 billion. We have raised the money, the corporates have raised the money at 6 and 7% interest rates in dollar terms. And we are busy helping US by parking these funds in their treasury bills, etc., at 2%. Will at least we calculate, what is actually required and keep only that and, make use of the balance judiciously. Earning just 2%. It's like, a mother borrowing at 7%, the father is lending at 2%, whereas the children are trying to go to school and borrowing monies at 80%. I think Forex represents the biggest irresponsible handling, I think, since reforms. What's a key risk? GST. GST in the form of GST and VAT has been implemented in 160 countries. In the form which is roughly equivalent to what India is attempting now, it's about 139 or 140 countries. In 129 of those countries, the party which implemented to GST lost the elections, the ensuing elections immediately after GST implementation. Why? Because the informal sector, non-formal sector, one who is not taxed now, will get caught under the tax under GST. Even if during the chain of transactions, even if one transaction gets into the formal sector, then that's all. All the GST will be recovered. And believe you on me, those are the people who go and vote. And if he has to, from not paying taxes or paying partial taxes, avoiding partial taxes, he has to pay 20 or 22%, you think he's going to keep quiet? But however, if you ask me GST should be implemented, I say yes, yes, and yes. Because that will open up a lot of opportunities. Today, we don't buy from those informal sectors who don't get an invoice, give an invoice. All the industries will go there and buy from him. It will create a lot of opportunities for them, maybe after 2 or 3 years, once he adjusts. But it will create jobs. So we should, so this is the last slide. Can India grow at 12%? We should judge it by the potential. Can we grow at 14% or 16%? I think growth for the growth's sake of growth is the ideology of cancer cells. What we should be concentrating is employment. That is the key insulin which can deliver development and prosperity and freedom from poverty to the various people. That's the best way to reconcile the growth-oriented economists with the socialists. Employment is the key. I tell you, we have attempted so many things. You create consciously 5% employment year on year for 2 or 3 years. I will bet my life on it. 12 to 14% growth will follow as light follows day. Automatically. That's the key. Instead of focusing growth, we should focus on employment. Create employment at all costs. Find out opportunities. Let the government expand this one. Ours is one of the least taxed countries. Tax 5% more and create jobs left, right, and center. 14% growth will come sooner than we imagine. To eradicate poverty in 5 years, we have all the resources. Our food stocks are about 220% over the buffer stocks. We have the wherewithal to solve it. We have to integrate the poverty and food market. We have to integrate the GST market by creating, supply capabilities and, trade integration. And lastly, as I said, financial integration. Make funds available to those people at 25 and 30%. There will be a million micro entrepreneur who is taking care of his own jobs. He will create value. He will create GDP for you. He will create growth. He will create the economic prosperity. He will deliver himself above poverty line. Lastly, what all needs to be done? As I said, shed benevolent culture, shed pretenses like DTC, GAR, FTA. They all seem to be meaningless, innocuous terms to me. Concentrate on few key constraints and you will deliver yourself growth. This is my book. If you happen to read it, there is an email at the end of the book. And maybe you can, if you have any thoughts to add to my thoughts, you can write to me. We can engage in a conversation. Once again, sir, thank you so much for asking me to be here. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir, for providing knowledge and insight into such a challenging area.
I'll just present a copy of my book to Mr. Fadnis.